Okay, sorry, I didn't catch your call sign, mate. This is Mike 0, Juliet, Charlie Fox. Do you want to QSY to 525? Is this frequency in use? Is this frequency in use, please? Nothing heard. Station who QSY'd with me. This is M0JCF. Name is Mark on the Black Fen side of Sid Cup. Who have I got, please?
Okay, good evening, Mike. Mark, sorry. M0 Juliet Charlie Foxtrot. This is Mike 1 Echo November Echo. The name here is Stephane, and I'm located in West Wickham, close to Browning.
Good evening to you, Stephane. And is it Stephane or Stephane? Sorry, I don't want to get your name wrong, but I think this is the first time we've spoken to each other. And West Wickham, Bromley, yeah, I know it. I know West Wickham, and I know Bromley. Quite often I travel through that way when I'm on my way to Croydon. You know, when I have to go to Croydon every now and again for work, I quite often go through that way. But yeah, nice to meet you for the first time, and thanks for coming back to me on this 2 meters. I'll tell you what I'm using today, Stephane. I'm using an old Trio TR-7200G and a dipole that I've made out of a piece of a tape measure. It's something that I've been talking about with a few people over the last week or so, and I've just got it out in the garage. It's where I keep all my old rubbish, and I just thought I'd hang it up tonight on the rafters of the garage. So we're at ground level, and I've put this old rig on. I haven't used this old rig for quite some time, so it's putting out about 6 watts. That's about it, I think, about 6 watts. And as I say, an old piece of tape measure cut in two to make up a dipole hanging vertically from the rafters in the garage. That's the story this end, Stephane. Back to you. M1ENE. This is M0 JCF.
Juliet Charlie Foxtrot. Okay, Mark, no worries at all. Well, it works very well. It's interesting they should actually to just bring back some old equipment and test them and see that they work fantastically. But I'm quite impressed about your dipole with measuring tape. That works very well.
Yeah, thanks for that, mate. Yeah, as I say, what it was is I put it on YouTube. I've got a YouTube channel, and it's just a place to store videos. And I decided just the other day to make a really quick and simple antenna that you can roll up and put in your pocket, and like 2 meter band, but you can make it 70 centimeters, 4 meters, 6 meters, etc. And basically I just got one of those cheap ones from, it was either Poundland or B&Q, somewhere like that. I think this one might have been B&Q. And as I say, I cut the dipole for 145/500, so it was easy. The first part I just pulled it out to the correct length. I then cut it with a pair of scissors. Then the second length came out of the roll, and I cut that on top of the old one. The yellow paint that's on it, I just rubbed off all of the yellow paint and drilled 2 holes. Connected a bit of coax to it, a bit of military grade RG58. It's only about 3-4 feet long is the coax, so it's a very short piece of very good quality RG58. Then I mounted the 2 pieces of tape to a short section of a 1/2-inch plastic pipe. Basically just connected it all up, and as I say, it works very well for what it is, and I called it the 222. It's the 2 meter band, 2 minute, £2, €2, $2 antenna. And the idea was I just wanted to give it a catchy name. I mean, it took longer to make, and whether it cost £2 I don't know, but it's definitely cut for the 2-meter band, so I've got one out of the 3 okay. As for the radio, somebody gave me this, must have been 3 months ago now. He's been promising to give it to me for nearly a year, and is a work colleague of mine. He lives up in the Liverpool, Manchester area. He's a G7, but he hasn't operated for probably, I don't know, 25, maybe longer, 25 years, maybe longer. And he knew that I like to collect old radios and stuff, and that I restore them as well as homebrew. And he just said, I'm going to throw this one in a dustbin. It's an old crystal controlled radio. Now, I've got a couple very like it. I'm a big Kenwood and Trio fan. So this 2-meter band Trio that he was going to throw in the dustbin, I said, no, send it to me. But anyway, he did. And sure enough, I mean, all of the repeater crystals are no good, because obviously they were for the repeaters that were around in the day, back in the 90s and before, up in the north of England. So the repeater channels are no good. I think this one's 24 channels. And but it's got quite a few simplex channels in there, and I say it works very well. Instead of 10 watts, it only puts out 6 watts now, but it's great. You know, it's got a great tone to it. It seems to be on frequency. The crystals haven't drifted anywhere, and it was just I thought I'd give it a go today. So it was in the loft. I'd use it a couple of times there where my normal shack is, and but my older stuff I've got down in the garage. So I just brought it down into the garage today, and I thought, you know what, I'll mix it up with this this little antenna, and just see what comes up if I call CQ2. And as I say, you've answered me. So what's your story there, Stephane? I see you're an M1, so I take it you've had your license quite some time, and I'm not sure, was it the M1 that followed the 2E one, which was like and it wasn't intermediate then, was it? Was it like foundation's the wrong word as well, a novice? There was the novice license, wasn't there, that they bought out in the early 90s, and wasn't the M1 that followed that? I'm not too sure on the licensing way back then, but that rings a bell. So back to you, M1ENE, M0 JCF.
Yeah, so the story is actually they just stopped doing the MOS on the licenses, and then you could actually take your full license to the exam as the full license. So that's what I did. I didn't do the novice or intermediate. I just went straight to the full license, and I just succeeded on the exam, and I became an M1. So full license. From yeah, but it was about 25 years ago. Back to you, Mark.
Oh, absolutely superb. That's how it worked, because I actually failed the radio amateurs examination, the RAE, in 1978. I was 14, 15 years old, and I'd been a shortwave listener and a radio builder since 1974. When I was 11, I built my first crystal set and started listening to shortwave radio. And you know how it is. You're a teenager, and you think you know it all, and you know, it was, yeah, I can do that exam. I know it all, you know. And of course, I sat these exams, and it was absolutely terrifying and terrifying. I didn't know anything. I mean, I knew the questions, but the biggest problem was I didn't actually know how to answer the questions. You know, sort of, I understood what they were asking, but I didn't know how to formulate an answer that made sense and actually, you know, and actually gave them what they wanted in a good format. So that was where I really failed. And of course, the second paper, which was the licensing conditions, etc., I really didn't have any idea. I sort of had some technical ability, but I didn't have any idea. And as it was, yeah, I was the usual stroppy teenager, and it was, well, you know, if it's not good enough for you, then I don't care about your hobby. And I just carried on. I think with that, I actually went out and bought a 23 channel crystal controlled CB radio, and that's the path that I went down. And then of course I did my apprenticeship, which was in telecommunications, and I did a BTEC, and did the ONC and the HNC. And of course it was at that point I realised, you know, there were a lot of parallels with the electrical theory, that sort of stuff, you know, with amateur radio. But you know, life had then got in the way, and do you know what, I'm doing this for a living. I'm not too fussed about the amateur radio license anymore. And of course I took a different path. And then it wasn't until around about 2016 I found out that they'd gone to this triple license system, and I had a look at the foundation, and I thought to myself, do you know, I could do that with my eyes shut. Really could. So I went to the local club, Cray Valley, and they weren't running a course for that year for foundation. I think it was 2017 I went to the Cray Valley, and they said no, BDARS, which is in Bromley, probably you know it quite well, the Bromleyan District Radio Society, or whatever it's called. But anyway, I went along there and did the foundation. That was the end of 2017, and then I did the intermediate in March 2018, and then I was going to do the full license at the end of the year at Cray Valley. But unfortunately, was it Cray Valley? It might have been BDARS, can't remember. Anyway, the actual exam date was on the same day as my eldest daughter's birthday. And you know how it is, family comes first. So I just didn't bother with that exam. So I had to wait until the following year, and that's what I did at Cray Valley. I did the full license there. So I got my full license in 2019. So yeah, it wasn't too bad. It was a long, torturous route to get there from obviously the 1970s. But I've always been a keen constructor, and still always been a shortwave listener. It's just that it was the actual, you know, the formality of getting the exam and passing it, and that's what I didn't bother with. And I suppose a little bit short-sighted, but it doesn't matter. As I say, I'm grown up now, and my daughters are both in their 20s, and you know how it is. You get a little bit more expendable income, and that's what happened. That's how I've come down this road. But I like, as I say, I like all my old radios. In the garage, the radio I'm using now, as I say, is the old Trio 7200G. And then that's sitting on top of an old TS520S, an old analog hybrid Trio Kenwood, and next to that is an old shortwave communications receiver. It's an old realistic DX160 from the 1970s, but I haven't used that very much. Today I'm running this radio off of a homemade power supply, or rather it's a modified server power supply. It's an HP server power supply, and that's it really. That's the story. As I say, I've got other Kenwoods. I'm a real big Kenwood fan. I've got other Kenwoods and that, but they're in the loft. And one of the reasons for bringing this older gear into the garage is first thing in the morning, last thing at night, I was making far too much noise in the attic space of the house for those that, you know, are trying to get to sleep in the bedrooms just below me. So yeah, I sort of got stuck out here now. What it's going to be like in the winter, I don't know. I would imagine it's going to be quite horrible, but we'll have to see how that one comes. Let's see how this summer goes. So back to you there, Stephane. M1ENE M0JCF.
Okay, M0G Charlie Foxtrot. Okay, Mark, no problem at all. Well, actually, it's interesting because I started as well with CB on 27 meg, and yeah, it was quite interesting. Actually, it's a friend of mine who used to do CB. I was about 17, and I said, "Oh, that sounds really good." And he said, "Oh, actually, I'm selling my equipment. I'm going to buy something else. Are you interested?" I said, "Yeah, okay." So I bought this 20-channel Philips CB. With transmitting power was only 500 milliwatts, and yeah, I got the Varys from that. So same thing. I just transmitted a few months with that. I could see that I was not going very far in distance, so I just bought a new one with a bit more power. I think I went to 12 watts, and I started to do some DX on that. I was like, amazed to be able to speak to all Europe on 12 watts. And I used to live in Paris in those days, well, just outside Paris. And that's it really. So I did CB for many years before I came to the UK. So I came in the UK about 32 years ago. And my first job, actually, I was working for a company who was making some intensive care unit equipment for hospitals. It was quite interesting. And one of my colleagues was actually an amateur radio enthusiast, and he was pushing me while I was taking my CTN Guild in electronics. And then from there, he pushed me. He's like, you need to take your license. You need to take your license. And then I did, and that's it really. That's my journey.
Oh, absolutely superb. And of course, you've mastered the English language too, which is also very good. My French is abysmal. I did take French at school in the 1970s, and I did it for 5 years, believe it or not. And it's only just in the last year or two that I've been reacquainting myself with French and a little bit of German and Spanish. And of course, you can pick up some Italian as well. But, not to have a complete conversation, I can... I know sentences, and so long as I'm slow enough, I can do the odd thing. But I can tell you, I can tell you my name and where I live, and a few pleasantries and that, and I can sign off in French, that sort of thing. Which I think, when I talk to continental French people, on 10 meters or 40 meters, etc., they're always very appreciative that at least I tried, and I gave it some idea that, I showed respect for using a native language. But no, it's something that I quite admire Europeans from all over Europe, and they've got this good command of English, and in English is really, I think, quite a difficult language when you break it down and you look at it, and especially as we've got lots of words that are spelt the same but are pronounced differently, and likewise we've got lots of words that sound the same that are spelt differently. It's quite amazing, and you've really, it must be quite difficult for someone who's a native language isn't anywhere near English, especially East Europeans. I find that that they're almost reading from a script, because the conversation is quite short. But I'm always impressed that we can actually have that that conversation, albeit maybe only lasting a few minutes. It's always quite impressive to me there, Stephane. Back to you, M1ENE, M0JCF.
Yes, M1ENE returning. That's definitely true. Actually, when I was on 11 meters, I used to learn, the few phrases that they needed, to start the QSO, asking the QTH, the equipment, the power, and the weather like, what was the weather, and that's it. After that was the end of the conversation, because as soon as they were starting to go on something different, you were stuck. I was like, I'm sorry, I don't speak English. It was quite funny. So I suppose they do the same thing, as you mentioned. They have a script that learn that by heart, and then that's it. They go for it. Actually, that also pushed me to learn English, the radio, when I was about 17, to give a bit more effort at school on my English lessons. Because you got an incentive. At least I will be able to use it. By communicate on the radio, to communicate with people in English. Because, to be honest, the main language spoken over the world is English. Doesn't matter where you go, you find always someone speaking who can speak English. And I noticed that when you start to travel, outside Europe or even within Europe, and you don't speak the language, and you go to Greece or even Yugoslavia, anywhere you will. Well, it doesn't exist anymore, Yugoslavia, but in the Baltic, you always find someone who could speak English. So yeah, it's very, very. You're very lucky in a way that you don't have to worry too much about learning another language, as most of the people learn it from for you. So that's no big deal. Back to you, Mark.
Yeah, well, you know, Stephane, that nowadays we're all learning American, aren't we? We're all speaking American nowadays. So, you know, that's the crazy thing. I mean, the youngsters of today as well, they're learning a new language, or they're inventing a new language of their own. You know, you can talk to some English youngsters nowadays and not understand a word they're saying, because it's not just the language that's slightly changing, but the way that they speak, you know. They've got their own, almost like an accent, you know. There's a street accent, very, very prominent now. And I listen to my daughters sometimes, and I think, you know, you're not talking the English that you've always spoken. You're talking an English now that's a mix of American and street, you know. And it's quite amazing that you know that's come about in such a short space of time. But I think the American TV is obviously one influence, and of course the other influence is the internet, and the fact that, you know, so many or call them famous, I suppose they are famous, you know, celebrities, you know, they've all developed this strange accent, and of course the youngsters of today, they want to emulate those, so that's what happens, you know. And but yeah, it's great to, I say, it's great to speak to you. I've got no problems hearing what you're saying word for word, no problem at all. I'll tell you what I didn't do at the beginning as well, Stephane, I didn't give you a signal report, but you're 5 and 7 on this meter. The bulb's gone in it, actually. I've got to replace the bulb, so I've just been having to look carefully, and I can see in the darkness inside the meter that, yeah, you're an S7, no problems whatsoever. And yeah, it's sounding good. I don't think you told me what radio that you're using. What one are you using, and what antenna are you using at the moment there, Stephane? Back to you.
Okay, so M1ENE returning. I'm using a Yazoo, the FT991, and the antenna is a Colliner, which is the Diamond 510, yeah, that's right, N510X, I think it is, which has been on the roof now for about almost 10 years. But yeah, it's probably one of the best areola I had for 2 meters anyway. It works really, really well. And talking about, actually yesterday, there was such a good lift last night on 2 meters. It was completely amazing how much distances you were doing on simplex. I managed to spoke to a few stations in Bournemouth, a station close to Exeter. Then all the south coast was going quite nicely, New Haven and all that. Really, and Bristol as well. A few contacts last night. Really, really strong signal. I was completely amazed that the propagation was so good last night on 2 meters. But yeah, so only 50 watts, and with that Colliner. I've got also a beam on the roof, a 12-element beam. But the trouble, actually, I just put that only a few days ago. He fell down last winter, and some elements were a bit bent, so I just put that back in place. But my SWR is a bit high, so I need to go back and just sort that out. But I'm going to France tomorrow on holiday for 3 weeks, so I will have to do that when I come back. But yeah, so with your old equipment, you're doing very well. And actually, I've been looking at the YouTube. I'm just looking. I haven't, as we are talking, I'm not listening to it. But I'm looking at the pose picture for the 222 antenna, and I see your scissors on your workbench and the 2 tapes cut. So that's I will have to I will look at it in a minute. after our conversation. No problem at all. Back to you, Mark.
Oh, well, thanks for taking a look at that. You see, now that YouTube channel, really, the only reason I set it up was for storage. You know, I like to do the odd videos and stuff when I'm using older equipment, and of course, you know, videos take up a lot of space. So the idea was just to, you know, find storage space for them. Of course, YouTube is free, and of course, the advantage there as well is, you know, if other people are interested, then they can see them. So I started making it like that, you know, whenever I do using an old radio. Like I'm videoing this one, for instance, you know, when I'm using the old radios in particular, then yeah, I just tend to just chuck it up there and say, here we go, you know, like M1ENE Stephane on the 7200G, you know, and you know, there's no real technical ability or anything like that. And as you can see from the video of me making that antenna as well, there was no you know, no production qualities at all, but it's just a fun thing to do, and a few people showed interest in, you know, what I was doing with the antennas, etc. So I just thought, you know, if I put it on YouTube, you can go and have a look. But my main thing is homebrew and restoration of old equipment. So I do like homebrew as well. I'm building a couple of transmitters at the moment. I'm building a top band AM transmitter, and I'm also building a transceiver for 80 meters, 40 meters SSB. Now I built the receiver, and the receiver is just a regenerative receiver that covers both 80 and 40 meters, and you know, it's very old school, but it will resolve excuse me, it will resolve SSB if you tune it very, very carefully. So you know, it's that's the thing that really interests me, is the building and restoration. The other thing as well you mentioned was yesterday's lift. I think you'll find for the next couple of days that the mornings and evenings are going to be good for tropospherics on 2 meters and 70 sems maybe. I did have a look around yesterday on 2 meters, but nothing, you know, people were reporting contacts way down into Spain and some down into the Canary Islands. Well, I was only using 10 watts. I was calling CQ on 144-300 upper sideband, and I wasn't getting any replies yesterday, but I have the odd contacts into Belgium, France and Germany on 2 meters in that direction, and like yourself in the other direction, the Men dips around Bristol, that sort of area. The furthest west that I've got on 2 meters is actually Cornwall, and that was quite interesting. Somebody in Cornwall on 2 meters, and that was using 25 watts. My record for 2 meters is Sweden with 25 watts, and that was the beginning of this year. So I've done Sweden, Denmark, etc. in that direction. At the moment I'm using a 7-element beam that was given to me by Mal G1 NOX over in Dartford, but sitting on the garage roof at the moment I've got a 9-element LFA antenna to replace that. So when I can be bothered to climb on the roofs, because I've got to get onto 2 different roofs, take the 7-element off of the rotator and put the 9-element LFA on the rotator, and hopefully that will give me a lot better chance of DX. For some reason I haven't had really too much luck with the north of England. I've managed the city of Hull, HULL, on 2 meters, but yeah, I've not really had too much luck sort of beaming northwest. I think the part of the problem is the antenna I've got up there at the moment. When I beam northeast, northwest, I'm sort of beaming through the very top part of my roof, so there's probably some attenuation through the roof, because beaming west, beaming east and beaming south, no problems whatsoever, but beaming north, I think the antenna needs to go up at least another maybe a metre, maybe even 2 metres. But of course, I'm sure that you've got the same problem. I've got a station manager that doesn't like to see lots of aluminium on the side of the house and above the house, so I need to do something there. And for simplex working, I've got a J pole that I made when I was very first licensed, and I made it out of 15mm copper pipe, and that's been stuck up on the roof, well, as I say, the best part of 4 years now. So yeah, as I say, I'm quite active, not so much 70 centimetres, but I do go on it very, very rarely. But 2 metres, quite often I'll go on 2 metres, both FM and SSB more so. But during sporadic E-season, both summer and winter, you'll find me quite often on 10 metres. And then at the other end of the scale, I like 60 metres, 5 megahertz. You'll quite often find me on 60 metres. I find that a very enjoyable band. Obviously, it's not channelized per se, but you know, we've got bandlets in the UK, tiny little segments, so you have to be very careful where you're transmitting, because obviously we share it with the military. But and of course the other side, I do like 80 metres and top band. 80 metres I'll probably go to more often, and top band, my club, the Cray Valley Amateur Radio Society, they have a top band net at 8 PM on the first Monday of every month. So if ever you fancy just jumping on top band 160 metres, you'll find us there at 8 o'clock on the first Monday of every month. Now what we tend to do as well is start on lower sideband for half an hour or so, and then we move on to AM. And we have a good go on AM. And what's interesting about that is a lot of the club members, I've got lots of old 1950s AM equipment, you know, some old KW equipment such as the Viking, etc. And they've got some awesome sound quality out of that radio gear that's like 50, 60, 70 years old. And it's really quite amazing that they're keeping this stuff alive. So the oldest radio that I've got, apart from this one that we're using now, I've got an old Tango Romeo 2200GX, which is a 12 channel crystal controlled trio. Then probably the next oldest one is my TS520S, which you can see a lot of that in those videos that you were just looking at. And then I've got a few old Yaesu FT290R. I've got a Kodar AT5. That's going to be my oldest. That's a transmitter from the 1960s. It's top band and 80 metres AM and CW, but that one's in the middle of a restoration at the moment. In fact, I've been restoring that one for nearly 2 years, and I've also got to build the power supply for it. So that's what I was saying earlier, you know, my game is not really antennas and such. I'm very, very lazy when it comes to antennas. I make an antenna, I put it on the roof, I forget about it, you know. Like my HF antenna is just a long wire. It's 30 metres long. It's about 10 metres off the ground, and it's a wire that I used to use for shortwave listening. And all I done was put a 9-to-1 unun at one end, and then coax up into the loft into either a manual tuner or into the radio's auto tuner. I'm very, very lazy when it comes to antennas. As I say, I'm not big on experimenting with different designs. I know a lot of hams, they really, really love experimenting with antennas, and they're constantly cutting and building and mending and bending, and you know, but it just doesn't really float my boat. You know, I'm happier with a soldering iron and some transistors and capacitors, and make myself an oscillator and amplifier, and if I can get to the end of the garden, I'm really, really happy. So that's the story this end. M1ENE M0JCF.
M0JCF for M1ENE. Okay, Mark. Well, that's really, really good to have the knowledge. And it's funny because I was trained as actually, like I said, I passed some exams, got the CTM guild in electronics, but I never worked in the field. I probably worked for about 2 years, and then I changed job. I went in computing. And when computing, you don't actually, put some. You don't have actually a board.
There's the antenna just hanging off the rafters.
And IC and all the rest, which I quite enjoy doing that. But I lost, unfortunately, I did lose the knowledge that I learned at college, and because I didn't practice. So if I see a schematic diagram, yes, I will understand it, but making things or even designing things, it's beyond me now, which is a shame. Actually, funny enough, yeah, it's really annoying because I just had a fantastic power supply, worked very well for many years, and just backed up last month, and I can't find anyone who's got the knowledge to repair it. And it's a shame because it's much better than the one I just bought to replace it. Yeah, that's it's a shame. When I do understand, the bridge rectifier and all the rest. But I don't
there's
have the
the
just put my
power
finger in it
supply.
and just do some fault findings and all the rest. Back to you, Mark.
Oh, superb. But yeah, I mean, it'll all come back to you at some point, I'm sure. So I'm just moving the camera around. You were saying about the power supply, and I thought I'd show on this video the homemade power supply that I'm using at the moment. As I say, it's from a server. A Hewlett-Packard server. I think this one's 42 or 43 amps, about 12.5 volts. More than I need for this radio. But I mean, it'll run a big HF radio, no problem whatsoever. It would easily run your 991. And I tell people that, I say, why spend all of the money that you're spending, on big linear power supplies when you can modify a power supply, from a server or something, and then you always get you can't use switch mode power supplies, they're RF noisy, blah blah blah, and you think to yourself, you're saying that, you're telling me that, but actually you've never actually ever tried, have you? And they look at me as if to say, no, I haven't. I say, well, why are you telling me that they don't work then? I'm sure you can tell me now, there's no RF noise coming from this power supply through this radio transmitting to you, and I certainly can't hear any RF noise on this radio, and as I say, it's not interfering with your signal at all. But no, you say you forget it, and you can read a schematic, etc. But at the end of the day, a transistor is just a switch, and depends how fast you switch it, whether it's just switching on and off slowly as a switch, or switching really, really fast, in which case you've got an oscillator, or you can use it, as an amplifier, and switch higher voltages, etc., and turn it into an amplifier, and then it's just a case of picking the right transistor for the job that you want. And then there's, little things like, if you want something with a high input impedance and a low output impedance, then that depends on the transistor configuration, and then you pick the transistor for the right frequency range that you want to use, and before you know it, it all comes back to you, old man. I say, I forget so much. I forget things. I forget what day of the week it is sometimes, but you always remember the next day that you got to get up and go to work, and then you know what day it is. So yeah, it will come back to you. And as for the repair of your power supply, I would imagine that if it was a linear power supply, the first thing I would always check on it, if it's not the transformer, then 9 times out of 10 it's the bridge rectifier that's gone. If not, it will be one of the regulating transistors. Of course, you've got obvious things like the capacitors, if they're bulging or leaking or anything, but of course a blown capacitor could be because a transistor has blown. So at the end of the day, say, a little bit of poking around. Start off with the mains. Have you got mains going in? Is the transformer primary shorted out or open circuit? If it's either of those two, then pretty much you're stuffed. Likewise with the output side of the transformer. But you know, little steps, isolate things and just take it step by step. And I'll tell you what, you'd have that repaired in a very short time, Stephane. Back to you. M1ENE, M0JCF.
Yeah, M0JCF or M1ENE. Well, that's what I did. I just opened the box. I just look at the obvious, you know, if you could see anything burnt or anything like that. I replaced all the fuses, and as soon as powered up, it powered up, but boom, it cuts automatically straight away. I thought, okay, right. I checked a few things. I thought maybe yes, it's the bridge rectifier. I just looked at that, but I thought, you know, I was like, oh, I don't know if I should actually look into it too much because, first of all, I didn't want to get a good belt, but yeah. I don't have the confidence anymore to look into that. Just simply look if there's anything burn. If it's something obvious, yeah, no problem. I just take the soldering iron out and just replace that component. But you know, if you have to do a bit of poking and you know, do some fault finding, it's a bit more complicated. And you know, I just have a meter, ohm meter, and well, it does current and voltage, but I suppose you can do quite a lot with that already. Yeah, I didn't. It's just beside me. It's such a shame because it's such a good one. I would have to try to sort it out really. Like you said, stage by stage and just eliminate. Okay, that's working. Move forward and see. But I've been looking on the internet for the diagram. And I couldn't find it anymore because at least if you see some you know, some test points, you can actually look and you know that the voltage you should be able to get there. If you get it, so you know that actually it's after. If you don't have it, you know it's before, and then from there you can trace back until you isolate what's not working properly. But yeah, I can't find the diagrams for that power supply. It's such a shame.
Oh, I see what you're saying, yeah, and switch mode power supplies, especially ones from servers, etc., they're notoriously difficult to find the circuit diagrams for, purely because you know, it's a proprietary piece of equipment, and people like HP and Sun, Oracle, Dell, you know, they just don't want people using their power supplies for something else, so they tend to keep everything very, very close to themselves. But yeah, sometimes you can reverse engineer, sometimes you can work your way backwards. As I say, what I would do with a classic linear power supply is just isolate everything. So isolate the input of the transformer, then the output of the transformer, and keep working your way, gradually connecting things back up until the fuse blows, or you know, whatever the symptoms that you've got. But I'm sure if you was to send me an email via my QRZ page, Stephane, I might be able to help you out there. And the only other place that I do go to, and I find it quite helpful, once again, is YouTube. You know, so many people have repaired power supplies, radios, and all sorts of equipment nowadays. And like me, they like to document stuff that they're doing for future use. And you'll probably find that your power supply, somebody's repaired it on YouTube. And it's very interesting that we say this, because one of my club members had a power supply this week, and he had no output, absolutely zero output. He couldn't find schematic diagrams or anything like that. So I literally went to Google, put in his power supply, the make and model and known faults, and the very first hit was someone who repaired one on YouTube, and he said, I couldn't find the circuit diagrams, blah blah blah. I thought this sounds familiar. He said, so I started checking all of the MOSFETs and transistors, nothing wrong with any of them. Then he went through the capacitors, nothing wrong with any of them, and it turned out to be a 390 kilo ohm resistor that controlled the output of the power supply, and it had gone open circuit. Now he replaced it and it worked fine. So I said on our club forum, the only information I can find is the 390 kilo ohm resistor gone open circuit. And you know what? Yesterday, I think it was yesterday, he replaced that resistor and his power supply works. So there are other people out there that, you know, a lot of these faults are very, very common, and there are other people out there that have come across it and managed to repair it. So you could do no worse than even going to YouTube Direct and just going into the search magnifying glass and just putting in your power supply, and just see if somebody comes up and says, oh yeah, it's very common, all of these do this, and it's, you know, a transistor or a smoothing capacitor or something like that, and you might be pleasantly surprised and find out that the solution's right there in front of you. But you know, it depends how far you want to go. Talking of going far as well now, Stephane, I see we've been at it now for 45 minutes. It's been a great rag chew, but I've got something that I need to go and do now as well. I've got something to do at 8 o'clock, so I'm going to wind it up now if you don't mind. As I say, thanks for coming back to me. Lovely to speak to you on this old radio that I haven't used for a long time, and lovely to speak to you as well using this antenna. I'm very, very surprised with the terrain between us. There is a slight undulation and a slight hill at New Eltham. It goes over New Eltham and Elmstead Woods. There is a hill there in between us, so I'm very surprised that this dipole is actually at ground level, is actually doing the journey out to your Diamond X510. So I'm really, really pleased with the results. As I say, I've recorded this anyway, and later on I'll probably end up putting it on YouTube as well, just once again as storage, just to show, you know, this old radio working. I don't think I've done a video of this old radio yet. So great speaking to you, but just out of interest, do you have a signal report? Once again, I don't think I wrote it down. I know you were 5 and 7 to me, but if you could give me a report just for the record, that would be great. And I look forward to catching up with you again. As I say, if you want to send me an email via the qrz.com, my email address is there, and if you want to send me an email with the power supply that you're having troubles with, you never